WEMB Sports Radio.
Welcome to the second hour of Tri-City Sports Now. It's me, Marky Billson, along with the right rev of speed, NBCSports.com, and sometimes serious talk show host or contributor, Jerry Bonkowski, joining me. No, there wasn't a Cup Series race. There was a lot of motorsports going on, especially here in Bristol. But to begin with, I wanted to talk to you about something that happened in the NASCAR Truck Series, because for the first time since 1960, a victory was overturned. Ross Chastain, he led the last 141 laps of the race, but they gave the victory to Brett Moffitt when it was said that the truck was too low, the number 44, when it was measured with the NASCAR height sticks. And they even say Chastain's truck was extremely low in the front. Look, I would have... Why in the world would being low give a truck that much more oomph to win the race? Could you explain that to us, Jerry Bonkowski?
Well, yeah, it's more about the aerodynamics. And, you know, if you're lower, in theory, your aerodynamics are better, and you get better performance. The thing that I question, and, you know, this is strictly my opinion, but, you know, the truck passed pre-race inspection fine, and it didn't pass post-race inspection, and as NASCAR said, the truck was way out of tolerance. It was, you know, past the standards. That's why it was disqualified. So my question is, you know, was there an incident that caused the truck, you know, maybe did it break? Did some of the suspension break? Was it involving contact that caused the suspension to drop? I mean, there's a lot of variables here, but obviously NASCAR felt that there was enough, elements to disqualify. Or, I'm not sorry, take the win away rather from Chastain. Now they are appealing it. We should hear some kind of a word on the appeal sometime this week, but I don't think so that NASCAR will reverse it. But you know, there's certainly room for argument there, I think.
So it's kind of like what we saw with the drag racing, say a funny car with the big wheels in the back and down, or just you got a hot rod and you jack it up in the back and all that. It's not just to look cool. There's a little bit of, there's the aerodynamics as well, Jerry Bonkowski. But I want to ask you, about that. I mean, what would cause a truck to lose this? I mean, did the shocks just go bad? I mean, are there bumps on the track? What's going on?
Well, you know, again, I mean, anything can happen on a suspension, and you know, again, this is my opinion, but I've always believed that the suspensions on trucks are more prone to, you know, lower tolerances or braking, something like that, than the Xfinity or the Cup Series. So, again, I don't think that this was something intentional. I don't think this was cheating. I don't think this was, you know, anything nefarious. It happened. And, you know, but of course NASCAR felt that it was a bad enough violation and outside of the rules, so they took the win away. And again, this is adding meat, if you will, to NASCAR's policy that they said earlier this year, where they were going to start disqualifying teams that failed post-race inspection if they win the race, or not disqualify, but take the win away, I should say. So they did. I mean, this is proof that NASCAR is definitely very serious about this. But you know, I think a lot of people are going to be watching this and saying to themselves, you know, where do we go from here? What's going to happen going forward? So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
So the Truck Series is now becoming like the Kentucky Derby, if you will. But yeah, they mentioned, you mentioned the crackdown and all that, wanting to get this right. I always thought that with the Kentucky Derby, it wasn't such a bad thing that the winner was disqualified, because it got us talking. I always think that talking is the best thing, all things considered and all this. And, I mean, you don't want something talking for maybe talking's sake, but potential rules violation. Let's discover more about the sport. Oh, the horse shouldn't be able to cut in front. Oh, the truck shouldn't be that low. You learn something here, I think.
Right.
You know, so there you go. I guess we learned right now that it won't be John Force's 150th funny car victory But I thought that, I was watching the race, and I remember over at Thunder National here, and it was after, let's see here, give me a minute here to get my thing. After Tasca was able to, Bob Tasca, defeat him in the final race, right at the end of the programming, if you will, about 5 o'clock. I found it was his first victory in 7 years over the man that won qualifying, John Force, that everybody was looking forward to his 150th funny car victory. It was a victory for Ford. It was something that Tasca said was his biggest victory of his career. And it also was, it wasn't necessarily a big race team winning, if you will. It was, and I just want to say the significance you thought of Tasca defeating Force in that race. What was your thoughts here about Thunder Valley?
Oh, I thought it was a great race. I mean, as I mentioned in my story yesterday after the race, I used the phrase that all the stars had aligned for John Force. I mean, he was number one qualifier. He had a first-round bye. He beat Jack Beckman and Tommy Johnson Jr. in the following 2 rounds. And, you've got to give a lot of credit to Bob Tasca in the third. I mean, Tasca, ironically enough, used to work for Force, and Tasca's crew chief also used to work for Force. So, there's a lot of satisfaction, I'm sure, with that team. Now, Tasca, a lot of people don't realize is that, they say, well, it's his first win in 7 years since 2012. Well, remember, Bob scaled back dramatically, on his schedule for several years. He was only a part-time driver, and he only, did, just a few races here or there. He recommitted this year. He got better sponsorship. I think he's doing the whole full schedule this year, if I'm not mistaken. And, to beat a guy like John Force, and, that's one of the most difficult things to do. To beat a guy like Force is, that's saying something. So I can understand why Gaston's saying this is the biggest win in his career, because it was huge in the whole. And then, the other thing, too, is, it was kind of like the day of the underdogs, as I mentioned in my story, because not only did Tasca take out Force in the top fuel final, Steve Torrance was going for his 6th win, and he wound up losing to Mike Salinas from Team Scrappers, which is out of, I think they're out of San Jose, if I remember correctly, San Jose, California. And, Team Scrappers has really come out of nowhere. I mean, this is their 2nd final. It's the first win for Salinas this year. And, I mean, I'm sorry, no, he also won it, I believe he won at Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. But, I mean, they have come out of nowhere, and, for them to go up against, the defending champ who's won the last 5 races and win, that was huge as well, too. So I think that, the folks that attended the race this weekend at Bristol Dragway, otherwise known as Thunder Valley, they definitely get their money's worth. And, the only thing, Marky, there's only one thing that I kind of feel sad about for this weekend at Thunder Valley was the fact that there were no pro stock cars, and there were no pro stock motorcycles. So, I mean, you basically had a abbreviated show, if you will, because you only had top fuel and funny car, which are obviously the 2 most popular classes in the sport. But, I would have liked to see either the pro stocks or the pro stock motorcycles there as well to kind of give it a little bit more of a well-rounded feel, so to speak.
Well, I want to focus in on the funny car and the top fuel here, because I did think that there was something else. We talk a lot about, hey, could Dodge come back into NASCAR, the Cup Series or whatever? And the thing about Tasca, he was talking so much, Ford, well, they weren't in the sport. They weren't in drag racing, at least funny car racing, for 4 years after 2014. So this was a big victory for them to come back in. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Does that work in drag racing too, in your opinion?
I think you could say that definitely is a possibility. The thing is that certainly these are very wild, exotic vehicles. You can't go to your local Ford dealer and say, hey, I want to buy the same car Bob Gaston drives.
I mean, I see the pony, the Mustang on his grill of his funny car, but yeah, I mean, obviously,
exactly. But that being said, the nature of fans out there, race fans out there, they do oftentimes make their decisions predicated upon either a manufacturer of the vehicle or a sponsor, things like that. So when you have a guy like Bob Gaston III winning in a Ford Chevy dealer and see what the Camaro's all about. So, there is definitely that whole thing is definitely still very valid, and that's why the major manufacturers are still involved in sports like NASCAR and NHRA, because they do indeed sell a lot of their cars based upon what the experience the fans have at the various races.
No, I mean, for Ford coming back in, and I mean, you see the result here, at least they're got their name in a box score on the sports page and such. I want to tell one story that's related to that. In my old cab driving days, I remember the tow truck driver, George Kroll, and I remember one time he was bragging about he had bought this new, I think, Mustang hot rod, and he tells me, I never was really big on Fords until I started seeing what you guys do to these Crown Vics on the road, and they keep coming out there every day, so I figured I better buy one, and all that. And I wondered, that same similar mentality, wait a minute here, Tasco wins, he goes and takes the car in 4 seconds, actually 4.81 thousandths of a second, or 316.23 miles an hour, to beat John Force, who's having in his attempt to win his 150th race. Well, there you go. It's the similar thing. I'm just curious. I mean, if Ford gets back into funny car, I mean, could that possibly? I mean, you think the executives up, at Mopar or something? So maybe we ought to try, throwing our hand in the gear. We're not having the best reputation for reliability anymore. The 300 is getting a lot of cracked engine blocks and all these things. Maybe we ought to go back into NASCAR these days. I mean, could you see something like that if this is successful, or this continues to be successful for Ford in funny car racing?
Well, let me backtrack one quick second. Mopar Dodge has a very big presence in NHRA right now. I mean, they're not so much in top fuel motors are in theory they are in fact rather Hemi engines, which are obviously Dodge products. So all the top fuelers out there are driving Dodge motors, no matter the car or the dragster itself is not branded as a Dodge Charger or Challenger, whatever the case may be. There are no Dodge funny cars that I know of right now, but the Pro Stock class is very, very big, and Mopar is very big on that. That being said, to address your question about NASCAR, I would be the happiest guy in the world if I saw Dodge came back. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of rumblings, a lot of rumors. I have a lot of good friends that work for Dodge, especially at their headquarters in Auburn Hills, Michigan, and it's been the topic of discussion quite a bit. The problem, though, Marky, is that even if Dodge, let's say hypothetically tomorrow, were to say we're getting back into NASCAR, it would probably take them at least a year and a half. We're talking development. We're talking about getting teams acquired, getting parts together, all that kind of stuff, before they could come back to NASCAR. So you're looking at 2021 at the earliest if that were to happen. Now, when Ray Evernham brought back Dodge back in, 2001, I think it was, he actually started working on that at the end of '99, the end of the '99 season, and then he just it was, like I said, it was well over a year in the works. He got Bill Elliott to drive for him. He also had Casey Atwood with the first two pairings. So I mean, it takes time to develop our car. You just can't say we're going to go NASCAR racing and be there a month later. It's just, there's just so much time and effort. But that being said, if Dodge were to come back, I just can't see it being in 2020. I'd love to.
Yeah.
There were a lot of rumblings, they were, but I think that the earliest, if it does indeed happen, would be 2021.
It's curious. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about the Challenger against the Mustang and the Camaro. I mean, sedans in American cars, they're becoming few and far between. I think that Ford, the only sedan that they will have left, will be the Mustang. So, what can you say here? So let's talk a little bit about Mike Salinas. I guess throwing the upset. I mean, he had to put a new engine in his car, and he ends Steve Torrance's 5-race winning streak. The time, mind-boggling, 325.69 miles an hour. Ran the course in 3.8 seconds, 3.836 seconds. You want to be technical about it, but I mean, here, Torrance, that was the draw to come out for the race and all this. His winning streak ends. Where does Top Fuel go from here and all that? What are the storylines now that Torrance's streak has ended?
Well, that doesn't mean his season's ended by any stretch.
No.
Yeah, I mean, he'll come back with I think I mentioned this on the show last week, or one of the shows we were at, Monday or Friday, whatever day it was. I'm convinced that Steve Torrance not only is the best driver out there, period, right now, and I'm talking about all classes, not just top fuel. I think he can very easily win 10 plus races this year. He's halfway to that, and we still have. Yesterday was the 11th race, so we've got another 13 more races to go. He can very easily win 5 more, if not more, in those final 13. And remember, too, of those 13 remaining races, 6 of them are playoff races in the countdown to the championship. And he won the record last year, all 6 playoff races. No one's ever done that in any class. So I'm not. I mean, hey, he lost a race yesterday. He had a great weekend. He wound up losing to a car that was better at that particular moment. I'm not selling Steve. I'm not starting him, Steve Torrance, short by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's going to wind up winning a lot more races. I think he's going to win the championship, and I think that this is a guy, in my opinion, and we've seen guys like Tony Schumacher. He's the all-time winningest top fuel driver. He's got 8 championships. I think it's 84 wins, 83 wins, something like that. I think Steve Torrance, when he's 36 years old, he's got probably another good 15, 20 years of racing ahead of him. I think he could become the greatest driver we've ever seen in top fuel racing. I mean, with what he's done in the last couple of years, I mean, he's just getting warmed up. He's just getting started.
High praise, indeed. Well, we compared this winning streak, if it would last to 10 races, which it won't, how would that go against Richard Petty in Cup Series? But yeah, having that focal point of the sport cannot hurt. And but there was a good story, at least, in the streak being snapped. Well, NASCAR goes to Sonoma, a road course again. Unique motorsports going on. I guess road course isn't all that unique, but used to only be Watkins Glen in NASCAR. Now they got more road courses going on there. So yeah, something a little bit different. We'll talk about that on Friday. Hopefully, if you can return here, Jerry. Tri-City Sports Now will return after this. Can you do?